Hi everybody, and welcome to today's video where I'm going to be showing you how to build a shed base on this existing concrete yard floor. And you can see that we've purchased all the timbers for this part of the project. We also have timbers here for the roof because we were using exactly the same materials for the base and the roof. But in this video we're going to be focusing exclusively on the base. So first things first, I'm just going to mark everything out on the floor, and you can see here I'm just marking with a level. Prior to this, I have used a roofing square off the wall on the right hand side here just to come square off that wall. And this corner here for me was the most important corner. I also wanted this to be square to run to the back wall. This will mean that our front, left and right corners are perfectly square. And the reason that I'm doing this on the front as opposed to the back is the back wall is actually sloped. So from this front left corner to the back wall, it's around 1600 millimeters. And on the other side it's around 1900 millimeters, so quite a big difference there. And due to that, it was very important for me to get these front two corners nice and square because it's just going to make the rest of the build a lot easier. Okay, so once I was happy with the marking out, I'm going to start to cut the front and back timbers. So the first one here is the front timber for the base, and then I'm going to cut the back timber around 20 millimeter longer to account for the slope that we have on that back wall. Then I'm going to place them together, and I'm going to ensure that this end here is completely flush, and this is where I'm going to mark out our first joist. Following that, I'm just going to use a saw here just to square across. Obviously you can use a square if you've got one handy. I'm just going to mark a little X there so we know where the joist is going, and following that I'm just going to mark 400 centres. So the first one there is going to be marked at 380 millimeters, and then I'm going to put a little cross there on the right hand side of the line, and that's going to be where the joist lands. And then following that, every additional joist is going to be marked at 400 with the X on the side that you want the joist to be landing. And if you measure now from the first to any one of these, they're going to be a 400 millimeter center to each timber. Once the marking is done on these timbers, I'm going to lay them in the actual position they're going to be in the base, and then I'm going to lay another piece of timber across using the marks that I've just created. This is going to allow me to find the angle for the cut here on this back wall. So I'm using a sliding bevel to get this. You can see I'm just fiddling about with this now to get it just right on this timber. And once I've got that, I can adjust the chop saw so we can ensure that all the cuts are going to be exactly right. So you can see there, happy with that, and we can move and transfer that to the chop saw. Following that, I'm just going to be working with my brother here to cut all these timbers. So he's measuring them out, he's telling me the length of each joist, and as I'm going and passing them along to him, he's continuing to give me the measurements, and then he's going to start passing me the timbers across just to make life a little bit easier. And you know, as always, it's always much better working with another person. It just makes, you know, life a little bit easier to have somebody helping. And following that, my brother's going to go and fix this all together, and he's using the nail gun, 2 fixings in either end into the end of each joist. Obviously if you don't have a nail gun, you can screw this, that's completely fine, but pretty straightforward really. We have the marks on the timber, so we just ensure that the joists are on the marks and just add 2 fixings to either end on both sides. And once that's done, you can see how this looks when it's finished. And I'm going to show you an angle here that actually does that back wall slope a little bit more justice, because the camera angle that we had before didn't really show it that well. But you can actually see how much that really does slope here. And that's one of the major advantages of building this shed base. It's going to make use of all that space at the back edge. Obviously if you'd purchased a shed pre-built, it would be rectangular and you would kind of lose that space there. It would just be a void behind the shed. Following this, our next challenge is to level the base. So this is my brother's yard where we're building the shed, and the floor here, the concrete floor that exists, is quite uneven. So not only do we have that slope on the back wall, which means that the base has to be an unusual shape, the floor is also very unlevel. So the back right corner that's just out of shot here is the high point, and essentially what we're having to do is we're having to use the level to level around, and I'm just using a couple of pieces of timber here to prop it up, and you can see I'm just adjusting these slightly. It actually worked out quite well just with these timbers and without any packers. So once we had it at a position we were happy with it was nice and level, we needed to come up with a more permanent solution. And what you can see me doing here is creating some little legs essentially. These are little props we're using offcuts from the 4x2 that we made the base with, and we're fixing these into the joists at the exact height that gets the base level. You'll also notice we're adding some black plastic to the bottom of these. This is DPC. I just had a little roll of DPC lying around in the shed, so we decided we'd put this on the bottom of the legs, and that's going to just protect it from any surface water, and it's going to stop any water soaking up and wicking up through these timbers into the base timbers. Now, the base timbers themselves are obviously pressure treated. As you can see, they've got a kind of slightly green tinge to them, and that's going to mean that as opposed to an untreated timber, these timbers are going to last at least 3 times as long. But by adding this extra layer of protection with the DPM around the bottom of these little legs, that's going to stop any water wicking up into the shed base, and it should mean that the life of this shed is prolonged by quite a long way due to this extra layer of protection. You can also see that we've got a row of noggins here. These are at 1200mm from the front edge, and that's going to mean that our OSB flooring that we're going to be placing in a second fits on there perfectly, and it lands halfway on those noggins and just gives us a nice solid edge to fix to. And there we go. You can see all our little legs on now. We just need to measure up, and it's just a case of putting our OSB on. And this was really easy because we took our time to square those front corners up. That means that the front edge of this base is completely square. So all we needed to do was rip down the length of the front. I believe the base itself is around 2100, so we had to rip around 300 off. And with a little bit of a tap there, this is going to fit absolutely perfectly, and we can start to fix it down. So prior to fixing it down, I'm just going to mark it out with a level. So I'm going to find them fixings at the front and then mark it with the center of the joist with a pencil mark, and that just gives it a nice little line to put our screws in at. So pretty straightforward this, just use a level, run it from front to back, little mark with a pencil, and it just makes life a little bit easier for when we're actually screwing the OSB down. And to do this, I'm just going to be adding 4 screws along each joist all the way along, and that's just going to give us a nice solid fixing. Following that, I'm going to measure this angled cut at the back. We're going to pop that in and do exactly the same thing. We're just going to add a few screws all the way along, make sure we're going to every single joist, and there we go. We're going to end up with a nice solid floor. And there you go guys, that's the end product, and as you can see, it's lovely and square on that front edge. You can see our little legs underneath there propping this up, making sure it is completely level, and this is going to make the rest of the job so much easier. So the next video that's coming out is going to be the walls. We're going to be putting them together in the next one. So if you like this video, make sure to like. If you're not already subscribed, subscribe, and you will be notified for the next one. And I will see you in the next video, guys.